Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Welcome back everyone to lecture 3. So in this lecture, even though in the last lecture we actually started the text, we're in the text of course, but in this lecture we're actually going to start the mantiq part of the text, which is to talk about al-ilm al-hadith or temporal knowledge. These lines are going to be lines 19 to 23. Those are the lines of the text that we're going to read. And what we're going to do is we are going to learn that there are two types of temporal knowledge. There is conceptual knowledge, what the logicians called tasawwur. It's a concept, you conceptualize something in your mind. And then tasdeeq, which is a judgment. So in logic, we're interested in the concept and the judgment. I can conceptualize something and then I link those things together and make a judgment of it. You can conceptualize something and not believe in it or not have a judgment. We do that all the time. We understand what somebody else's argument is, but we don't believe them. So if we link A and B together and we make a judgment, a tasdeeq, that's also another type of knowledge. So we're going to talk about the two of those. We're going to talk about how some of this conceptualization and judgments are natural, it's instinctive, and how some of them require some type of proof. And then we are going to learn that which achieves the conceptualization is al-qawl al-sharih. It is the defining expression. So every time we talk about concepts, conceptualization and logic, we want to know what is the defining expression, and the al-qawl al-sharih. And then that which reaches to a tasdeeq is al-hujjah, is proof. Now, therefore, the rest of the logic is going to be divided into those two topics. The first part is a tasawwurat, concepts. The second part is a tasdiqat. So what I'm going to do is, rather than jump into line 24, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction about what we will find and what we will discover in both parts of logic, and therefore, because of that, what are the underlying points that the logicians are going to talk about. And then inshallah in the next class we'll jump into the next line of poetry. Those are the main topics for today. I'll see you back here for the first clip inshallah. Alright, so we begin the way we always begin these textual based classes, by reading the actual text. Again, this is going to be lines 19 through 23. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين أمين. إدراك مفرد تصورا علم ودرك نسبة بتصديق وسم وقدم الأول عند الوضع لأنه مقدم بالطبع والنظر ما احتاج للتأمل وعكسه هو الضروري الجلي وما به إلى تصور وصل يدعى بقول شارح فلتبتهل وما للتصديق به توصل بحجة يعرف عند العقلاء. So he says rahimahullah in line 19, إدراك مفرد تصورا علم. The conception of an individual object is known as a tasawwur, a concept. وَدَرْكُ نِسْبَةٍ بِتَصْدِيقٍ وُسِمٍ. And the conception of a relationship between the two individual objects is known as a judgment, as a tasdeeq. So you can know A individually and B individually, and then when you put A and B together, that's called a judgment. We'll get into the commentary. I just want to do the translation quickly. وَقَدِّمِ الْأَوَّلَ عِنْدَ الْوَضَعِ. Give precedence to the first over the second in conventional usage. لأنه مقدم بالطبع, because it takes precedence over tasdeeq by nature. So we're going to first talk about conceptualization, and then we're going to talk about judgment. A lot of times people make mistakes in how they conceptualize things. It's not just a given, but you have to have the right concept first. In usul al-fiqh we say حكم شيء فرع عن تصوره. To give a judgment or a ruling on something, you must first be able to conceptualize it, and then you can make the judgment. So if your concept is wrong, if I have, like I usually have a flask of water next to me, if I have this flask of water and then you say, oh, he's drinking alcohol, well, your concept is wrong. And then you're going to say, well, the sheikh or the teacher is drinking alcohol, so that's haram, he's a fasid, and so you're going to make all of these judgments, but the error comes back from your conceptualization. So we have to discuss the conceptualization first, and then we will talk about judgment. So, like I said in the introductory clip, it's about half of the rest of the poem is conceptualization, and a little bit more than half is going to be the second part, which is the judgments. Line 21, وَالنَّظَرِ مَحْتَاجَ لِلتَّأَمُّلِ. Acquired knowledge is that which requires reflection. وَعَكْسُهُ وَالضَّرُورِيُّ الْجَلِي. And its opposite is knowledge that is necessary and self-evident. So we have two types of conceptualization. One requires reflection and one is natural. I'll get into that. Line 23. وَمَا بِهِ إِلَى تَصَوُّرٍ وُصِلٍ. And that by which the tasawwur, conceptualization, is achieved. يُدْعَى بِقَوْلٍ شَارِحٍ فَلْتَبْتَهِلْ. It is called al-qawl al-sharih, which is I translate as the defining expression. So be diligent in your request. And then line 23. وَمَا بِالتَّصْدِيقِ بِهِ تَوُصِّلَ. And that by way of which the tasdeeq, the judgment, is reached. بِحُجَّةٍ يُعْرَفُ عِنْدَ الْعُقَلَى. Is known as the hujjah, or the proof, according to the logicians. Okay. So let's go back to line 19. Knowledge, as defined by the Sharia, is to be able to conceptualize. If you can't conceptualize, then you're not going to be on the path of knowledge. And as I said a few minutes ago, the conceptualization can be correct or can be incorrect. So the definition of al-ilm is mutlaq al-idrak, is to be able to just conceptualize. Now, in line 19, the conception of an individual object is tasawwur, and the conception of the nisbah, the relationship between the two objects, is known as a judgment or a tasdeeq. So the first thing is that we have judgments, we have concepts, and we have judgments. So the conceptualization of something is to know something's individual parts. If I have this pen, then I know that there is the, casing of the pen, and then, maybe inside it there's this ink or ink cartridge. So you know that there's an ink cartridge that goes inside it. So, okay, I understand these are individual parts. There's the base of the pen, the body of the pen, and then there's the cap of the pen. That's the conceptualization. Then knowing that those things together allows me to write, then you know that you've passed a judgment that this is a writing instrument. I mean, I know that sounds very mechanical, but I'm giving you a simple example so we understand what he's trying to talk about. So the judgment is putting the pieces together correctly. So there can be therefore errors in the concept, because you could say that this is a screwdriver. If I just went like that, what did I just show you? And the concept and judgment sort of quickly happening, you could incorrectly say, well, he had a screwdriver, or he had a pointer, or he had a spoon. I mean, whatever, making it up. That would be an incorrect concept, and then therefore you would draw an incorrect judgment. Or you can correctly understand the individual pieces and then put them together. Oh, it's a pen, there's a cartridge. Okay, good, concept is right. Therefore, what's your judgment? Therefore, you can eat with it. That would be the wrong judgment. I mean, I know it sounds very silly, but in more complex matters, complex intellectual matters, especially in the age in which we live in, if you analyze people's speech, you will find oftentimes that there's going to be major errors in the concept and then major errors in the judgment, because they're making a judgment on false concepts. So in logic, and this is why the study of logic is so important, in your journey as a Sharia student, is that you have to learn to think clearly. If you can't think clearly, that means you won't understand, and if you don't understand, you won't be able to articulate clearly outside. So there's the concept, and then there is the judgment. Just to repeat, the concept is the conceptualization and the judgment. The conceptualization is conceptualizing each individual piece The judgment is putting all those pieces together, and therefore, it can do such and such, or it is such and such. So the example in my book, because this is a Azhar book, so of course examples are going to all be about Ash'ari Aqidah and things like that. So he said, if I say to you, al-alimu hadith, that the world is contingent, or comes into being, is not eternal. Al-alimu hadith. So you can understand the world as the created world around us. Al-hadith, that which is contingent or that which comes into being, is the opposite of that which is internal. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not hadith, hasha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is qadim, He's eternal. And we talked about all of that in our Aqidah class. So, okay, I understand the individual world, al-alam. I understand the quality or the adjective here, hadith. I'm going to put them together and I'm going to say al-alam wa hadith. Oh, therefore the world is created. It's not eternal. It has a beginning, and therefore it will also have an end. Okay. Now, when it comes to, that's just a simple example, and I gave you many other of my own examples. Now, when we talk about conceptualization, Imam al-Razi radiallahu anhu highlights that when it comes to judgments, into judgments, there are 4 really subcomponents to judgment. This is just like a little detail. I'm not going to test you on it, and you'll see that it's at the beginning level it's unnecessary, but we have time, so I'm going to bring it up to you guys. The first thing is that you have to conceptualize that which is being presented before you. Like in the example we gave, al-alim wa hadith, that the world is contingent or the world is created. Number 2, you have to understand the relationship between those two parts. So you are saying that the world is created. The word world is here being described by creation. So you have to understand that there is this linguistic relationship between the two. The number 3 is you have to understand how the parts impact one another. I see I'm running out of time. Let me pick this up in the next clip. I apologize for that. Okay, so I was sharing with you which is a very unnecessary detail in logic, but because the book is so thin and the time that we have is so long, I have the opportunity and the luxury to give you guys some of these extra things. So we were talking about conceptualization and judgment. The going example that we have, just so we're on the same page, is al-alim wa hadith, that the world is contingent or the world is created. So Imam al-Razi radiallahu anhu, he says in that transaction there are really 4 pieces. The first piece is to understand and to conceptualize the individual pieces. In this case, the individual pieces are al-alim wa hadith, that the world is contingent. Number 2 is to understand that one is being linked to the other. So, A is being described by B, not B being described by A, okay? And number 3 is to understand what is being presented in this concept. So to understand the potential judgment without believing in the judgment. So therefore you are saying that the world is contingent. That means that you are saying that the world is in time and not eternal. And then number 4, correct. The world is to believe in that. So when you kind of get down and drill into the mechanics of it, there are going to be those 4 independent parts. And that's sort of one of the things that Imam al-Razi radiallahu anhu offered for us. Line 20. وَقَدِّمِ الْأَوْلَ عِنْدَ الْوَضَعِ لَأَنَّهُ مُقَدَّمٌ بِالطَّبْعِ. You give precedence to tasawwur, to conceptualization over judgment, because you have to conceptualize first before you judge. And I gave you the example of usul al-fiqh, حُكْمُ الشَّيْءِ فَرْعٌ عَنْ تَصَوُّرِهِ. By the way, when we say the hukm shay, to give a ruling on something in language of usul al-fiqh, that's the exact language of a tasdeeq, and understanding the nisbah in the example of logic. So it's really one concept in Islam that has different language, different, you can think of the concept like in the middle, and then above it and below it, the different subjects and the different sciences are going to be talking about the same thing in different language. So in grammar, when you talk about the i'rab of a word, that is a tasdiq. That is because the tasdiq is the nisba, is the relationship. This is ism inna. It has to be mansub, or this is the fa'il. It's marfu'a. That sentence right there, that is tasdiq. That is understanding the individual components. That this is the fa'il in the sentence, and therefore what is the hukm on it, using the language of usul al-fiqh. What is the nisba, using the language of the language? It is that it is in the marfu'a case. So the deeper you get into the Islamic sciences, hopefully you can see that they're all really saying the same thing, but from different vantage points. And you need to know these things, because when you read the thicker, what did I say thick? When you read the longer books and the more dense books, I think I was thinking of the language as heavy and thick. You will see that the ulama use these different words, and I want you to understand what they mean. So sometimes they use the words of logic, sometimes they use the words of kalam, sometimes they use the words of usul al-fiqh, so on and so forth. Anyway, so conceptualization and then the judgment between them. If you can't conceptualize something, you won't be able to make a judgment. Now, on simple matters, we can do that transaction very quickly. But in more complicated matters, not really. So knowing that there's a distinction and one comes before the other is important. Line 21. والنظر محتاج للتأمل وعكسه هو الضروري الجلي. Acquired knowledge is that which requires reflection, and its opposite is knowledge that is necessary and self-evident. So conceptualization can be acquired and self-evident, and judgment can be acquired and self-evident. So therefore, we have 4 categories. So let's give an example of each of the categories so we know what we're talking about. So a conceptualization that is acquired is if I say the word tayammum. Tayammum, so you gotta do some thinking. Okay, what is tayammum, or dry ablution? We're Shafi'i, so we have to use dirt that's not mixed with anything. So you have to conceptualize it, and we are looking for the qawl al-sharah, the defining expression, and defining these components: dry earth, not admixed with anything. The stuff that we read in the text of Abi Shuja' radiallahu anhu and its commentaries. And then you can conceptualize it. So it's a conceptualization that is acquired, because you have to bring into your concept these different words, these different parts, define them, and then you got to string them together with a judgment. And then there are concepts that are self-evident, like a triangle or a square. You got to kind of conceptualize it, if I went like that, or like that for a circle, this part, sorry, it's not very accurate, then it's a concept, but it's self-evident. You don't need to go that far. And then likewise with judgments, there are some judgments that are let me follow the same order that I did. The judgment that is acquired, like al-alam hadith. So if I say that the world is contingent, or the world is created, or the world is not pre-eternal, etc., then that is a judgment, because we've made a nisbah, we've made a link between these two components, al-ilm wa hadith, but it is acquired because of the steps that we just talked about. But then there are judgments which are self-evident, like knowing that 1 is half of 2. I mean, it's just self-evident. Or that the part is less than the whole. Or the whole is equal to the sum of its parts. Like axioms that we have from the ancient world. Those are judgments that are self-evident. You don't need to spend so much time talking about them. Okay, and then 23, where are we? 22, sorry, 22 and 23, they'll go together. So, وَمَا بِهِ إِلَى تَصَوُّرٍ وُصِلٍ يُدْعَ بِقَوْلِ شَارِحٍ فَلْتَبْتَهِلْ. And that by which the tasawwur, the concept, is achieved, we call this al-qawl al-sharih, defining expression. Now I know that I've translated the text, but I do sometimes use the original Arabic because at some point your English is going to have to give way to your Arabic when you read the larger text. Al-qawl al-sharih, that's what we're looking always for when we talk about the concept, the conceptualization. What is the defining expression? And then when it comes to tasdeeq, with judgment, we are looking for the hujjah, the proof. وَمَا لِلتَّصْدِيقِ بِهِ تَوَصِّلًا بِحُجَّةٍ يُعْرَفُ عَنْدَ الْعُقَلَى. And that by which the tasdeeq, the judgment is reached, is known as the hujjah, or the proof, according to the logicians. Okay, now so right off the bat, when we're talking about logic, we have, other than the introductory stuff, why we study logic, and the introductory, like the hukum, I mean, let's just put that to the side. What is logic? Islamic logic is concepts and judgments. It's very simple. So we're trying to find the concepts and the judgments. When we talk about the concepts, التصورات, then we are going to spend a lot of time talking about language. So there is, al-bahthu fil alfaz. Just like in usul al-fiqh, you're going to have a long section that talks about the use of language. What does language signify? Linguistic forms. I'm just reading you the titles. On the relation of the linguistic forms to their meanings. On the kull and kulliya, juz and juz'iyya. We also met those terms in usul al-fiqh. Defining expressions, al-mu'arifat. Al-mu'arrifat is very important because most people are not able to make a correct definition. And the definition is jama' mana. I've used that expression before. Jama', it brings together all related things, and mana, it pushes away things that are not related to it. A lot of times people just are sloppy. They don't make the right definition. And you can't use the concept in the definition because then it becomes circular, etc. What else do we have? Yeah, and then the next section is the tasdiqat, are the judgments. Now when we talk about judgments, sorry, cat caught my tongue. We are talking about propositions, al-qadiyya. So we are going to make a proposition, which is to relate one thing to another. And, I'm running out of time. Let me pick this up in the next clip, I'm sorry. Okay, so I was trying to give you this this kind of like brief introduction. And I was saying that in the second part of logic, we talk about judgments. So the tasdeeq. So to talk about the judgments, we need to talk about what we call al-qadiyya, which is a proposition. So the judgment is a proposition. Now the proposition on its face is not going to be always correct. We gave examples of how it could be incorrect. So there's a lot of times talking about propositions, al-qadiyya, a conditional proposition, at-tanaqud, which are contradictions or contradictory propositions, to convert, the conversion of a proposition, and al-qiyas, syllogisms. And this is, in the Western world, what is more commonly, emphasized. We have it too, but I just want you to know in the order that it comes in the syllogisms. And then figures, al-ashkal. What are the other sections here? Hypothetical syllogisms, supplements to the syllogisms, and then we're going to get to proofs, and then the conclusion. Right, so that's the order, that's the rational order, the logical order after this little introduction that we gave, is that we are going to always start with the tasawwurat, the concepts, which is basically looking at language and how language works. Very, very similar to usul al-fiqh. And then we talk about judgments. What do we talk about in judgments? We talk about syllogism, al-qiyas. It's the same word as in usul al-fiqh we translate it as analogy. Here we translate it as a syllogism. Syllogisms. So it's the same order. So usul al-fiqh and logic are really kind of like moving in parallel to that. Now, when we come to talk about tasawwurat, judgments we'll get to several lectures from now. So let's just focus on at-tasawwurat, which is the concepts. We are basically saying that the individual piece of what I have conceptualized indicates something. There's a dilala there. It indicates something else. So, there are three types of these indications. One indication can be established. Second indication can be natural. And a third indication can be rational. Each one of these can either be expressed or non-expressed. So therefore we have a total of 6, and that's what I wanted to do in the last couple minutes. Let me give you examples of the 6. So you can have, I gotta read the Arabic and then translate it to you at the same time, so sometimes there's a little bit of a stutter, and I apologize. Let's talk about non-expressed indications or dilala, things that are established. Like when you see the mihrab, when you walk in the mosque, what does that indicate? It indicates for you the direction of the qibla. But it's not words, it's not expressed, but it's been established, somebody constructed it. Then you can have natural non-expressed indications, like if somebody turns red in their cheek and they're embarrassed. So that's non-verbal, and it's something that's natural, happens to all of us. Something that is rational, that is not expressed, that if you see something that is constructed, like I'm sitting on a chair, if you saw the chair, you would assume that somebody built the chair, somebody put the chair together. It didn't just exist out of nothing, ex nihilo, like that. Okay, so these are important because these are all silly examples, and we try to give the silly examples so that you remember, but then don't forget. So when you apply it to real complex things, you understand. Okay, and then we have dilala that is expressed, words. Some of them are established. For example, in Islamic logic, we refer to the human being as al-hayawan al-natiq, the articulating animal. That is an established definition. Then we have words that are naturally established, or sounds that are naturally established, like if you saw somebody with a runny nose and like coughing, those would be sounds, not necessarily word, but sounds that indicate the person is sick. Or if you walk into a barn and then all of a sudden, you start sneezing profusely, even though you are fine, that's a sign that you have allergies. And then there are expressed rational indications, dilala, that if somebody was in the other room and if your brother was in the other room and you heard them talking, that would be a sign that they are alive. So that's the mind makes that assumption. Of those 6, logic is concerned with expressed dilala that has been established, like al-insan is al-hayawan al-natiq. That is the area of what we're going to talk about. All those other examples are just simply to give us an understanding of the breadth of the signification, the dilala of words and of indications, so that we can have a proper concept that is followed by a proper judgment. But that is not, but we're not going to concern ourselves with that. We are only going to concern ourselves with expressions that have been established, and then therefore we can critique them. Okay, now that's kind of the main stuff I wanted to talk about. We have a couple of minutes, so I want to go back and see if there's anything that I was not able to share with you. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Tasawwur wa tasdeeq. We talked about that. That thing I shared with you about Imam al-Razi, rahimahullah, who is, one of the main figures in Islamic intellectual history, and most specifically in the Shafi'i madhab, um, about tasdeeq or judgment having those four categories, is that first you have the concept of the individual parts. Number two, how those individual parts would relate to one another. Number three, you understand the judgment that's being presented. Number four, you believe and you also affirm the judgment that's being presented. In my book, he also says, but some of the hukama, and usually when they say hukama, they're talking about philosophers or dissenting. They say at-tasdiqu basit, that judgment is something that's simple. It's not as complicated as that, because it is simply understanding and ascertaining the judgment that is between the individual concepts that you've conceptualized. And I don't think there's that much of a consequential debate, because the philosophers are correct from the point of view that when it comes to basic things like the silly examples that I've been giving you, it's very simple. You don't need to, go through this mechanical step. But Imam al-Razi is also right, because when it comes to more complicated, more advanced issues, issues in the world of thought, that that when we try to critique how people think, it can be those four minor, or those four parts, let's say, to establishing a judgment, are very important to highlight. Because if you study logic the way we are studying it, and you understand the definitions and the progression of things, it's almost like a mathematical equation. So if somebody makes a mistake, I should be able to go back and show them where they have made the mistake. This is very important if you get to the level of your intellectual journey where you are debating and critiquing other intellects or other thought paradigms or other thought leaders, either Muslims or non-Muslims or whatever. It's very important that you be able to pinpoint where they have gone wrong. So their conceptualization of the individual pieces might be correct, but their linking of them, the relationship between the pieces, might be incorrect. If you see somebody innocent who was killed, the assumption is that somebody who was an aggressor killed them, or they were killed by mistake, not that they killed themselves. So if you go on saying that this individual innocent person killed themselves, that would be the wrong judgment, because you have not, your tasawwur of the mahmul, your tasawwur of the relationship between A and B was reversed. A impacted B, not B impacted A in that example. So Imam al-Razi's delineation of those 4 points is important for that point of view. Anyway, we'll put a pin in it here. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Okay, alhamdulillah, in today's class, we did lines 19 to 23. I'm trying to be kind of the same pattern, the way I teach all of the classes, to be very textual. Just to give you a little bit of a personal insight, I'm finding that it might be a little bit difficult because the poem is just so slim. But I'm going to try to maintain my form as long as possible for the sake of consistency. For selfish reasons, because it's easier for me to teach if I'm consistent, and hopefully for you it's of benefit that it's better for you that I'm consistent. So we learned about the types of temporal knowledge, which is to conceptualize and to cast a judgment on that which you conceptualize. When we talked about conceptualization and judgments, we learned that naturally concepts come first and then judgments. And then we learned for each of the concept and the judgment, there is that which is acquired and self-evident. Acquired and self-evident, and I gave you examples of all of those. And then we also learned that which leads us to the concept, we call it al-qawl al-sharih, the defining expression. So if I wanted to critique somebody's conceptualization, I would say, what is your defining expression? What led you to define that concept? And then that which leads to the tasdeeq, to the judgment, is the hujjah, is the proof. So if I want to critique someone's judgment on the concept, I have to instigate, or I have to ascertain first, what was the hujjah, what was the proof that you used to make that judgment. And then we learned about all of the rest of mantiq is basically two halves. The first half is expanding out like an accordion, at-tasawurat, conceptualization. The second half is expanding out like an accordion, at-tasdiqat, or the judgments. When it comes to the tasawurat, the concepts, what we are focused on is basically an inquiry into language itself. How does language work? That which gives us the proper concepts. Very similar to what we found in Usul al-Fiqh. And then when we come to judgments, we're going to look at propositions, al-qadaya, and then we're going to look at al-qiyas or syllogisms and critiquing those and how to come up with definitions. So logic in Islam is concepts, conceptualization, tasawurat, and tasdiqat, judgments, and all of the derivatives below it. So for the next maybe 5-6 lectures, we're going to be doing tasawurat and its subparts, and then after that, the rest of the class, inshallah, to the conclusion, we're going to be doing a tasdiqat to the end. Those are the main topics that we talked about. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.